Stocks tumbled slightly with the news that may be uncertain. The president comes under fire for saying 100,000 to 250,000 may die from the COVID 19 contagion. The DNC may be canceled. Idaho experiences an earthquake. And could Elliot Stabler be back on TV? I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, everybody. What a glorious morning it is, too. Half tempted to skip the show and go for a run, but you know what? I like you guys a lot more than I like running. So we're going to do this instead here. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. We've got a ton to get to today. It's been quite the busy day, and of course, I woke up just a bit late because we were gaming last night. Video games are something else that I like to provide for you here, but we do need to get started as soon as possible. But before we get started, make sure you head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedom Scoop is a startup news website where we want to bring you the news and opinion from people who work for a living to people who work for a living. You know, you love Ben Shapiro. You love his ideas and opinions on things, but you got to keep in mind, he doesn't know what it's like to live like you and I do, even before he got to be a high-powered lawyer who's married to a doctor. He also came from wealth and privilege before that as well, so you got to keep that in mind as you go. But, you know, those of us who want to contribute on freedomscoop.com, we work for a living, and we were where you were at one point. So let's make sure that you come over and check us out. We've got the Generational Gap over there. We've got Wyatt Birkenhoff and his live stream over there. We've got... Did I go down? Oh, no. It's because my Wi-Fi kicked out on the monitor there. That's why it's off. Anyway, we have got the Generational Gap. We've got Wyatt Birkenhoff over from Roundtable Decision. We've got Stephen Ignoramus. We have got the R-Rated Conservative. We've got a lot of good content over there, and we've got more to come. So make sure you go over there and check us out. To start out with today, we're going to talk about stocks, and we're going to read from Investors Business Daily. This is from Alan R. Elliott. Stock futures in global markets sold off aggressively early Wednesday as coronavirus news turned harsher projections, prompting analysts to slash second quarter economic forecasts. Boeing led the steep early declines on the Dow Jones Tuesday. Zoom Video and Teladoc, among small groups of stocks benefiting from the coronavirus impact, posted early gains. Once again, we go back to the same thing I've been saying since the beginning of this. If you don't have a place to spend your money, you can't spend your money. So make sure that we get in there and we spend some more of that money. NASDAQ futures carved the narrowest decline, trading 2.8% below fair value. Dow Jones futures dropped 3.4%, and S&P 500 futures fell 3.3% on the stock market today. Selling was harsher among small caps, with Russell 2000 futures tumbling 4.5%. Goldman Sachs on Tuesday overrode its prior estimates for the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The bank now sees U.S. GDP decreasing 34% year over year during the quarter versus initial estimates for a 24% decline. The report targeted 15% unemployment by mid-year, compared to initial expectations for a 9% jobless rate. Macy's, Marriott International, and Royal Caribbean Cruise each fell more than 7% to lead the declines on the S&P 500. S&P Dow Jones Indices announced Tuesday that Macy's would be shifted from the S&P 500 to the S&P Small Cap 600 Index effective April 6th. And there you go. It's the things that people are told they're not allowed to do anymore. Marriott, yes, that you can still go stay at a hotel if you need to, but they're at 6% capacity on all the hotels across the country. Nobody wants to go on a cruise right now after we saw the disaster with the Japanese cruise line where people stayed on there for a month at a time. And Macy's is a non-essential business. They don't sell things. They don't sell groceries. They just sell clothing. So you can't just go there. And if you do, you'll get stopped by the sheriff's secret police and questioned and interrogated until you give it up. So once again, if you want to see this market start turning around, you got to start seeing people start buying stuff. That's the end of the story. We've got another story over here from CNBC. Dow futures fall 700 points as Trump warns of a very painful 2 weeks. This is from Fred Imbert and Maggie Fitzgerald. U.S. futures dropped early Wednesday morning and posted to sizable declines at the open following the end of the worst first quarter on record for the Dow and S&P 500, spurred by the coronavirus sell-off. Around 8:21 a.m. Eastern Time, Dow Jones Industrial Average futures were down 775 points, indicating an opening loss of about 813 points. S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 futures were down 3.4% and 2.8% respectively. So I want you to keep that in mind because those of you who've been watching this show for a while need to remember the fact that we were going through 2 weeks where it was limit up and limit down every single day. One day it was limit up, the next day it was limit down, and they've even had to hit the circuit breakers. So right now we're actually seeing some pretty major stability going along with this. It's not the best news in the world, but stability is better than a drop every day and then a rise to the limit up every day. And your futures, your 401k, and many other things with you are going to thank the stability over the wild, erratic roller coaster ride that we saw last week. President Donald Trump said Tuesday evening the U.S. should prepare for a very, very painful 2 weeks from the rampant coronavirus. White House officials projecting between 100,000 and 240,000 virus deaths in the U.S. And we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later here. This is going to be a rough 2-week period, Trump said at a White House press conference. When you look at night, the kind of death that has been caused by this invisible enemy, it's incredible. You know, sometimes I read these sentences through for the first time, and they don't make sense as I'm reading them, but once we get to the end, it does start to make sense. Data from ADP and Moody's Analytics show U.S. companies cut 27,000 jobs through March 12th. Actual losses for the month were far worse, as shown by the record number of jobless claims in the week of March 20th. Market Manufacturing PMI and ISM Manufacturing Index for March will also be released on Wednesday. And once again, we commented on what the unemployment number was that they tried to scare you with last week because it is all of the unemployment coming in all at once. The unemployment first time was higher back during the 2008 recession. The number of first-time claims across 6 months were much higher than what we saw in one day here, but it was all spread out across 6 months instead of all hitting on the same day, on the same exact day, or within a couple days of each other. So that is something you need to keep in mind. And CNBC actually has a chart, so I'm going to go ahead and link this in the Discord here. It was showing what we saw with the limits up and the limits down on the futures and the daily percentage changes as we saw, because we hit the circuit breaker in both directions numerous times, as I said. So thank yourself for some stability at least. Now I've got a picture here I want to read from this. This is posted at a doctor's office today. This came from Midget B over on the Discord server. He's a friend of the show and a friend of the Generational Gap. A general Freedom Scoop friend, if you will. He's got a whiteboard showing up here that shows every election year has a disease. SARS of 2004, avian 2008, swine 2010, MERS 2012, Ebola 2014, Zika 2016, Ebola again in 2018, and Corona in 2020. Facts. Coronavirus has a contagion factor of 2. SARS was 4, measles is 18. Coronavirus has a cure rate of 99.7% for those under 50 and infects. Coronavirus spread is leveling off. This is a viral pneumonia being hyped as the Black Plague before an election. So that's something interesting to keep in mind as you go, and thank you to Midget B for checking this out. Let's move on over to another CNBC article, and this goes on to the 100,000 and 240,000 we talked about in the beginning. From CNBC Health and Science, White House predicts 100,000 to 240,000 will die in the U.S. from coronavirus. This is from Berkeley Loveless Jr. and Dan Mangan. And this is where the title of this episode comes from, of course, because I did the math right before we went live here. And if you take 100,000 against 330 million people, you come out with 0.03% of the population. I mean, the numbers that they're touting on the low end is a quarter of the city of Milwaukee. It sucks, don't get me wrong. It absolutely 100% sucks. And I feel for anybody who lost somebody in this pandemic. But realistically, across the entire country, it's a very, very low number. I mean, hell, don't you remember how many people died across 10 years from gun violence, according to Joe Biden? 150 million people died from gun violence across, what was it, 25 years. Or 10 years, I'm sorry. Half of our population across 10 years. So let's see what Berkeley and Dan had to say. President Donald Trump prepared Americans for a coming surge in coronavirus cases, calling COVID 19 a plague and saying the U.S. is facing a very, very painful 2 weeks. This could be a hell of a bad 2 weeks. This is going to be a very bad 2 and maybe 3 weeks. This is going to be 3 weeks like we've never seen before. In the usual Trump rhetoric, Trump said at a White House press conference Tuesday, White House officials are projecting between 100K and 240K deaths in the U.S., with coronavirus fatalities peaking over the next 2 weeks. When you look at night, the kind of death that has been caused by this invisible enemy, it's incredible. The U.S. has more coronavirus cases than any other country, bullshit, across the globe, with 184,000 confirmed infections, according to data compiled by Johns Hopkins University. New York has now become the epicenter of the outbreak in the world with 75,795 confirmed cases. As of Tuesday morning, more reported infections than China's Hubei province, where the coronavirus emerged in December. I still call bullshit on that, because the number suddenly dropped and the number of recovered cases went way up as soon as they started kicking American journalists out. Now, of course, I've got to take this with a grain of salt because I do not have anything to prove the allegation I just made, but I just want you to keep in mind what the timeline looked like over there, and I'm sure that there is way more death and carnage over in China than we know about. Earlier in the day, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the outbreak in the state may not peak for 3 weeks. I'm tired of being behind this virus. We've been behind this virus from day one, the governor said in Albany. We underestimated this virus. It's more powerful. It's more dangerous than we expected. Trump, who grew up near New York City's Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, said no one can believe officials are setting up refrigerator trucks as temporary mortuaries outside the hospital. Trump said New York got a late start in rolling out its mitigation efforts. So I talked a bit about this on Twitter earlier when somebody mentioned the fact that, so much was going on here and why no place else in the country was seeing this. And there were a couple things at play. First off, Mayor de Blasio said, don't worry about it, go out and go about your business, right at the beginning of this. Right as cases were starting to show up in the city, he didn't do any lockdown. In fact, encouraged people to go out and have fun and do what it was that they needed to do. The second thing, of course, is the fact that they are living on top of each other. And those 2 points were made numerous times throughout the thread. And then the other point that I made was the one that I made yesterday. New York City is in prime flu season right now. It's cold, it's rainy, it's shitty. And that's when viruses mitigate in human beings, especially flu-like viruses. So that's something you've got to keep in mind. Like we said about California, they are outside of flu season. It's warm, it's dry. And it rains a lot from time to time. So it rains, washes things away, and then the sunlight sanitizes it, according to Nephilim Ninja over on the YouTube channel. So you got to keep that in mind as we go along. This is possibly, I'm not going to say probably, this is possibly going to get better once it starts getting warmer. And I do hope so, because I hope that we get a better result than what they're trying to say that we have. Let's move on over here to CNN. This is the same story. I just want to see what CNN has to say about it. This is from Kevin Liptak and Caitlin Collins. Trump warns of painful 2 weeks ahead as White House projects more than 100,000 coronavirus deaths. President Trump warned of a painful and tough 2 week stretch ahead as he extended nationwide distancing measures that, even if followed closely, could still mean more than 100,000 and up to 240,000 Americans die from the coronavirus. It was a stark message from a president who spent weeks downplaying the severity of the virus and questioned its potential impact on the United States. Yes, the president who closed off travel to China and was called a bigot for it spent weeks downplaying the severity. Trump did not minimize what has become the gravest public health crisis in decades during his remarks that stretched more than 2 hours on Tuesday. Instead, he advised Americans that darker days are still to come. I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead. We're going to go through a very tough week, Trump said, setting expectations for a dire fortnight where death rates spike. He was speaking during a White House news conference meant to formally reissue nationwide coronavirus guidelines after Trump, faced with dire models showing hundreds of thousands of potential American deaths, polls indicating support for social distancing, and calamitous scenes at New York hospitals, determined another 30 days of social distancing were necessary to avert disaster. After he spoke, the top health officials on Trump's task force presented a series of slides showing their models for how social distancing measures might help prevent potentially millions of deaths. But in a dire prediction, Dr. Deborah Birx said that even if the federal guidelines were followed precisely, between 100,000 and 240,000 deaths would still occur, a number that well surpasses the American death toll in the Vietnam War. And there again, they're trying to make scary, scary numbers out of something that's... I mean, having 100,000 deaths still sucks, no matter what. But compared to other things that kill people in the United States, numbers that are pretty much on par for anything else. Officials were quick to say they didn't accept that the figure is predetermined, and noted that high case counts in New York and New Jersey were pulling the projections higher, but the model laid bare the potential devastation the outbreak could inflict. So, there are a couple things to unpack on this, of course, and I've got a tweet from Candace Owens. I'd never thought in my life that I would cite Candace Owens on Contemporary, because before I ever hit the live stream button for any show, whether Ed's World Gaming, or anything else, I had discounted Candace Owens as a hack job and somebody who didn't need to have any sort of a recognition, but she hit one out of the park on this one, and I got to give credit where credit is due. This is from Candace Owens over on Twitter. The number one killer in America is heart disease, 1,002 people per day. Did you know that if you die from heart disease right now and they determined you to be an asymptomatic character of COVID-19, in your post-mortem they legally add your death to the coronavirus death toll? Now, of course, there's no citation that goes with this, but it is an interesting idea. If they have gone through and found out that you've either recovered and have the antibodies for COVID-19, or that you had it at the time that you died, you're going to be counted as a COVID-19 death. So this may actually be something completely, and this may be happening over in Italy too. That may be part of the reason that Italy's death toll was so high. So I would love to see an actual follow-up on this from a NewsGuard cited source, but that was something that I thought that we needed to address and see out of that. So thank you, Candace, for that. This comes from Ron Helton over on the Discord server. I got a couple stories that came from him over there. Coronavirus Navy captain pleads for help over outbreak. This is from BBC News. Apparently they don't believe in author recognition on BBC News. Scores of people on board the Theodore Roosevelt have tested positive for the infection. The character is... Did I miss a paragraph? That doesn't... No, I didn't. It's not there. The carrier is currently docked in Guam. That seems like a really weird place to start your article. We're not at war. Sailors do not need to die, Captain Brett Crozier wrote in a letter to the Pentagon. Captain Crozier recommended quarantining almost the entire crew. In the letter, Captain Crozier said that with large numbers of sailors living in confined spaces on the carrier, isolating sick individuals was impossible. The coronavirus spread was now ongoing and accelerating, he warned in the letter dated 30th of March. Decisive action is needed, he said. Removing the majority of personnel from a deployed U.S. nuclear aircraft carrier and isolating them for 2 weeks may seem like an extraordinary measure. Yeah, there are a lot of people that serve on an aircraft carrier. As a person who reads Clancy, who loved the Navy right in the beginning of his career, I have seen some of the numbers, and this was from the 80s, some of the numbers of people they put on. There are a lot of people that work and live on an aircraft carrier. It is ridiculous. It is not clear how many crew members on the Theodore Roosevelt have the coronavirus. The San Francisco Chronicle, which first reported on the letter, said at least 100 sailors were infected. Speaking to Reuters news agency, a U.S. Navy spokesman said the service was moving quickly to take all necessary measures to ensure the health and safety of the crew of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. So this is probably going to turn out to be like the cruise ship all over again. They're going to lock them down on there for 2 to 3 weeks to see who gets the disease, who recovers, and who comes out of it okay. They'll probably get some extra medical professionals on the ship, but for the most part, they're just going to lock them down. So, yes, it sucks, and I'm sorry for the people that are out on there, but it's the same thing we've been seeing from the beginning, so keep that in mind. This is also from Ron Helton. This is from ScienceAlert.com. Do you really have to disinfect all groceries now? An expert explains. This is from Donald Schaffner. There's no evidence currently that COVID-19 is transmitted by food. The biggest risk when it comes to COVID-19 and groceries is being around other people in the grocery store while you are shopping. Should I keep my groceries in the garage or on the porch for 3 days? This is patently ridiculous. Are you really going to keep your milk, your ice cream, your deli meats outside for 3 days? This also has very important food safety implications. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, or at the very least, spoiled food. There is a tiny nugget of truth in this advice because we know that the virus is slowly inactivated at room temperature with a half-life of about 8 hours. But this advice presumes that all groceries are contaminated and simply touching the groceries will make you sick, neither of which is true. Do I really need to disinfect all the individual boxes and baggies everything came in? I think this is also advice that does not make scientific sense. If you are concerned about the outside of food packages being contaminated, I suggest that you wash your hands and or sanitize your hands before you sit down to eat any food you might have taken out of these containers. And guess what? Washing your hands before you eat is the best practice even when we're not in a pandemic. Washing fresh produce with soap. Soap should absolutely not be used to wash food. Soap is not designed for food. As I mentioned in the linked thread, soap can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea if ingested. Current recommendations by scientific experts, including the FDA, say to wash fresh fruits and vegetables in cold water. See my earlier answer for more details. Are reusable bags risky? Many people use reusable bags as a responsible choice. We do this in my family as well. It's the best practice, even before the times of pandemic, to wash your reusable bags on a regular basis. I don't know how you get them dry. They're mostly synthetic and they will melt in the dryer, but do you. While it is theoretically possible that a reusable bag may pick up germs, including coronavirus, while in the grocery store, the biggest threat that anyone faces is someone else in the store who has COVID-19. I would suggest that you keep your grocery bags in the car so you have them handy for the next time you go shopping. If you're concerned that your bags might have the coronavirus on them, you can wash them. You should also wash your hands after you have finished putting all your groceries away. This was also good advice even before the pandemic. Actually, most of your grocery stores around here have temporarily banned reusable bags. You're only allowed to use the bags that they provide for you. They don't want anybody bringing the reusable bags in. I'm guessing because they don't want people to carry COVID-19 in from the outside world in their somehow sanitized grocery store that's usually about as dirty as normal. So thanks, Ron, for that. Then I've got one more here that Ron brought for me before we go back into the stories I found for the regular show. Coronavirus could travel 27 feet, stay in the air for hours, MIT researcher. This is from Lee Brown over at the New York Post. Social distancing guidelines to stay 6 feet from others may be woefully inadequate, one scientist warns, saying that the coronavirus can travel 27 feet and linger for hours. MIT Associate Professor Lydia Boriba, I think that's how you say that, who has researched the dynamics of coughs and sneezes for years, warns in newly published research that the current guidelines are based on outdated models from the 1930s. Rather than assumed safety of 6 feet, Boriba warns that the pathogen-bearing droplets of all sizes can travel 23 to 27 feet. Her research, published in the Journal of American Medical Association, also warns that droplets that settle along the trajectory can contaminate surfaces, and residues or droplets nuclei may stay suspended in the air for hours. She notes a 2020 report from China that showed that virus particles could be found in the ventilation systems in hospital rooms of patients with COVID 19. Bariba fears that the current guidelines are overly simplified and may limit the effectiveness of the proposed intervention against the deadly pandemic. Excuse me. She says it is particularly urgent for healthcare workers who, she argues in her report, face an underappreciated potential for exposure range while treating the sick and dying. There is an urgency in revising the guidelines currently being given by the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on the needs for protective equipment, particularly for the frontline healthcare workers, Bariba told USA Today. So, apparently we all screwed each other by staying 6 feet apart, according to this, and now we're all sick and we're all going to die. Or at least 0.03% of us. So, this is from the Daily Wire. Democrats demand DOJ release as many prisoners as possible over coronavirus, which blows my mind, but I can't comment on that. It's too painful. This is from Ryan Saavedra over at dailywire.com. House Democrats on the Judiciary Committee sent a letter to Attorney General William Barr on Monday demanding that he try to release as many prisoners as possible due to the rapid spread of the coronavirus across the U.S. Chairman Jerry Nadler and Subcommittee Chairwoman Karen Bass did not stop there with their demands. They told Barr to consider releasing prisoners regardless of the severity of the crimes for which they were convicted and regardless of the type of facility they were housed in. We call on you, in the most urgent of terms, to do the right thing and exercise authority to modify sentences of prisoners who weren't present or who present extraordinary and compelling reasons, and immediately move to release medically compromised, elderly, and pregnant prisoners into the custody of the Bureau of Prisons. The Democrats wrote, in addition, we urge you to use every tool at your disposal to release as many prisoners as possible to protect them from COVID-19. The two Democrats then stated that they had a problem with Barr's memo that said that inmates at low and minimum security facilities should be prioritized and those who are convicted of serious offenses should not be released, the two Democrats stated. Nadler and Bass's statement that Barr should consider releasing prisoners who were at high risk for contracting COVID-19, regardless of the type of institution in which they were housed and regardless of the seriousness of their offense, suggests that they want Barr to evaluate even the most dangerous criminals for potential early release, even those housed at the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, USP Florence and ADMAX, unofficially known as ADX Florence. So, the Democrats right now are trying to make the gun store a non-essential business and putting them down. Meanwhile, trying to get prisoners released, dangerous criminals released out into the general population. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania, I believe it's Philadelphia, has said that their police are not going to bother prosecuting small potato crimes like theft, and California has put themselves in a position where you can steal up to $1,000 worth of stuff without ever getting arrested. So, yeah, there seems to be some sort of underlying thing going on here that maybe we don't need to do. Well, let's move on. This is from Pop Culture, which is not NewsGuard and I would normally not use, but this is something that we need to keep in mind here. Watch. CNN cuts away, refuses to air MyPillow exec speech during the White House coronavirus press conference. Now, this isn't the one that was floating around social media, but it's still interesting to see. It was brought to my attention that CNN is cutting away from the press conferences to go cover other news while the president is trying to get the message out there. I mean, nobody watches CNN anyway because nobody's in the airports right now, but for those people who do, yeah, they don't even want you to have the information. They want to control the narrative at this point. President Trump's Monday press briefing on the coronavirus pandemic focused on the private sector's response, with several CEOs speaking at the White House. One was MyPillow founder Mike Lindell, a big Trump supporter who said Monday that God gave us grace when Trump was elected. When Trump introduced Lindell, CNN cut away from the press conference to cover the coronavirus news. While Lindell began speaking, CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer said the network would continue to monitor the White House briefing and get the latest information from the president. Blitzer then noted that the president said 1 million American lives could be saved by social distancing. Trump previously announced Sunday he would extend social distancing guidelines through April 30th and would release new information on Tuesday. While most of the executives who spoke during Monday's briefing shared examples of how their companies are helping the response to the coronavirus, Lindell's speech mostly focused on religion. He called Americans to read our Bible and spend more time with family during crisis. God gave us grace on November 8, 2016, to change the course we were on, Lindell said, referring to the day Trump was elected, reports The Hill. God had taken out of our schools and lives, or God had been taken out of our schools and lives. Let me rephrase that. A nation had turned its back on God. I encourage you to use this time at home to get back to the Word, read our Bibles, and spend time with our families. Lindell said Trump gave us so much hope, adding, with our great president, vice president, and this administration, and all great people in this country praying daily, we will get through this and get back to a place that's stronger and safer than ever. In his speech, Lindell did mention MyPillow dedicating 75% of its manufacturing to make cotton face masks. The company made 10,000 a day over the past 3 days, and Lindell hopes the company will be making 50,000 a day by Friday. So, good for Lindell. And good for the fact that he's coming in on the front lines and trying to get ahead of this. I'm really glad for people like Mike Lindell to be completely honest. But I mean, you're never going to hear this from the mainstream that CNN cut away from it. Of course, you obviously would have been able to watch CNN and watch them cut away from it, but nobody wants to do that. I mean, that's why we have an alternative media. That's why I'm talking into this golden microphone in front of you, because people lost their trust in CNN, and they're just playing partisan politics even more now by cutting away from something that's actually pretty important that we need to be paying attention to. So keep that in mind. They don't have your best. They don't want you to get the information yourself. They want to sanitize the information before it gets to you. And I've got a big block of Fox News here. So, first off, Dr. Oz calls on Cuomo to lift restrictions on potential coronavirus treatments. This is from Yale Halon. Go away, Sean Hannity. Nobody wants to listen to you. Dr. Mehmet Oz called on New York Governor Andrew Cuomo Tuesday to reverse an executive order prohibiting doctors to prescribe 2 anti-malarial drugs touted as potential coronavirus treatments outside of state-approved clinical trials or Food and Drug Administration approved uses. I suspect there were concerns for folks with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus who are dependent on chloroquine and couldn't get it, Oz told Hannity of Cuomo's order, which limits prescriptions of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine to a 14-day supply with no refills. I think Cuomo passed that law to prevent people from taking and putting it in their cupboards just in case. Now, see, that makes sense. But once if it's approved by the FDA, which they're working on fast-tracking it right now, if it is approved by that, you do need to make sure that people have the ability to get it and get a refill, especially. I mean, 14 days, yes, is going to be most of the run of the coronavirus, but if this reinfects people, which they keep trying to tell us that it's going to reinfect people, you do need to take that into consideration as well. I have more confidence in Americans than that, Oz said. It's an old malaria drug. We'll have enough of it, we ought to lift the ban. Well, if it's Schedule 1, or not Schedule 1, Schedule 2 rather, if it's Schedule 2, you also need to understand the fact that they're not going to be able to go and get it more than a pharmacist would prescribe it. And yes, they'll have some laying around, and it might go on the street for black market value, but for the most part, it's going to go in line with how the pharmacist has prescribed, or the doctor has prescribed it, and the pharmacist will fill it. So do keep that in mind, of course. Over the weekend, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization to treat coronavirus patients with the drug, which had been touted by President Trump as presidential treatments. As potential treatments, not presidential treatments, I'm sorry. They got a map of the deaths and the recoveries across the world here. Wow, that's kind of weird. So let's get rid of that one here. So now we're going to go on to election news, it looks like. So, top Democrats say party's convention may be canceled over the coronavirus threat. This is Marissa Schultz over at Fox News. I don't think it's over the coronavirus threat. I think it's over the Bernie Bro threat, to be completely honest. Because they are not going to win. They know it, and they're kind of pissed. Prominent Democrats, ranging from senior members of Congress to the party's likely presidential nominee himself, now say the coronavirus social distancing restrictions that have upended campaigning may also cancel the Democrats' marquee 2020 event. I'm not sure we're going to have a convention, Rep. Emanuel Cleaver, Democrat Missouri, a top ally of former Vice President Joe Biden, told Fox News. I think both parties are very likely, I hope, to agree on postponing the convention or doing something that won't bring thousands of people together to kill each other, ultimately with COVID-19, Cleaver added. Biden himself voiced doubt about the convention going forward in an interview Tuesday night on MSNBC. It's hard to envision that, he said. Again, we should listen to the scientists. He went on to suggest that there's no time to figure out what to do, leaving the door open. Who knows by the time we get into June, July, August, September what it's going to look like. Another senior Democrat expects the convention will be shelved because of the virus. I think the thing's going to be canceled, the Democrat told Fox News, and I think a whole lot of people don't want to go either. Representative Debbie Dingell said public health is a priority and any 2020 large gatherings need to be reconsidered. I think the DNC and the RNC both have to evaluate all their options, Dingell told Fox News. But we need to pray that we get through this quickly, but we also need to be very carefully consider any large gatherings for the next year. The convention is still slated for July 13th through 16th in Milwaukee and was to galvanize the Democrats nationwide and especially electrify voters in the key swing state of Wisconsin that President Trump won in 2016. Which, from me to you, says that the news media said, oh, Hillary Clinton didn't visit Wisconsin 1,000 times and now we can't get rid of the fuckers. The Republican National Convention is scheduled for August 24th to 27th in Charlotte. Trump and Biden have said they want the conventions to continue, with the president telling Fox News' Sean Hannity there's no way he'll cancel the convention. But with Japan already postponing the Summer Olympics scheduled for July 24th to August 9th, Cleaver says it makes sense for the U.S. political parties to take into account the public health risks of tens of thousands of people gathering together. I think that's a lowball estimate, but I mean, it's the same thing with 100,000 to 250,000 that Trump said earlier. Honestly, if he puts that out right now, at the rate things are going, I don't think we're going to get anywhere close to that. But if he puts that expectation out there of 100K to 250K, he looks like a hero when he comes out of it. He did the oversell. So I think that may have been strategic at this point to do the oversell so he comes out looking great. I mean, it's the same thing. If I need to quote something, I quote it much higher, and then when the price comes out lower, I look like a hero. So that's something to keep in mind. They might consider canceling. So Kyle Jurek might not be able to burn the city of Milwaukee down. What's he going to do at that point? How else is he going to put everybody else in a re-education camps? I'm glad I cut down the desktop video because that's the second time I've had autoplay pop on. This is also from Fox News, from Paul Steinhauser, Patrick Ward. Sanders still sees narrow path to win Democratic nomination. In another sign that Senator Bernie Sanders is in no rush to drop out of the White House race, the populist lawmaker from Vermont touted his strong grassroots movement and said that there's a path for him to come back and defeat former Vice President Joe Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination. Asked Monday night by host Seth Meyers in an appearance on Late Night with Seth Meyers why he's staying in the race, Sanders answered confidently, "We're about 300 delegates behind Biden. Biden has 1,200, we have 900. There is a path." Do you know what states still need to primary at this point? You don't have a path. Unless Biden does something really stupid or dies. The progressive champion, who's making his second straight White House run, then acknowledged it's admittedly a narrow path. But Sanders maintained he has broad support. "I would tell you, Seth, that there are a lot of people who are supporting me. We have strong grassroots movement who believe that we have got to stay in order to continue the fight to make the world know that we need Medicare for all, that we need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, that we need paid family and medical leave. Emphasizing other issues that he's championing, Sanders added that campaigns are an important way to maintain that fight and raise public consciousness for those issues. So that's, I think, one of the arguments for going forward. Biden, thanks to sweeping victories in South Carolina in late February and in primaries from coast to coast in March, has built up a 303 delegate lead over Sanders in the all-important race for convention delegates, making him all but certain Democrat nominee. And Biden enjoyed a massive wave of support from former 2020 rivals and leading Democrat members of Congress, governors, unions, and other groups as much of the party consolidated behind the former vice president's White House bid. Which, of course, is probably no coincidence at all. So he's staying in for the foreseeable future, and bravo, Senator. I want to watch this. I really do. I want to watch you get spanked and crushed one more time. And then I want to watch you get blamed for the fact that the Democrats lost to President Trump. I want to see that. I want to see that end just like that. And then all the progressives get kicked out of the Democrat Party and the JFK Party come back up. One more from Fox News here. Two more from Fox News I got coming up, but one more on election here. Biden debuts podcast to boost relevancy during coronavirus pandemic. This is from Paul Steinhauser and Peter Doocy over at Fox News. Joe Biden on Monday launched a new podcast titled Here's the Deal. Oh my God, he actually called it that. Oh my God, he actually called it that. He might as well just have said, here's the deal, fat. Oh, that's good. I clearly did not read this article before I started. That's awesome. In his latest effort to break through the coronavirus coverage as the crisis overshadows his campaign at a crucial political time, the former vice president, who's been working out of his home since the coronavirus pandemic, has forced more than half of Americans to huddle in their homes to prevent the spread of the virus, told his supporters. I'm sitting here in Wilmington, Delaware, and it's a scary time. A lot of people out there are confused. Things are changing every day, every hour, so I wanted to have this conversation with you. The all but certain Democratic presidential nominee explained that one of the missions of the new podcast is so that we can keep talking to each other. We can't hold rallies anymore. We're not gathering in large public spaces. We're living in the new normal, but I want you to know that I'm with you. I'm on your side. We're going to get through this together as a country. Keep in mind, this is also a way for his crew to edit what he says and make sure that the message that they want out of there to get out of there. That is something you got to keep in mind with that as well. So, I mean, Jessica Green, I talked to her, and she admitted the fact that when she does her podcast, she goes through and edits out all the times that she says, I do live stream because, yes, I care what you guys think of me because I want you guys to watch me, but for the most part, I want you to see the real thing, even if I trip over a word here and there while I'm trying to read. I want you to see the real way that I'm presenting this. But I guarantee that's not the message that's going to get out from the Joe Biden campaign. And Biden added that the second reason is I think this podcast could offer some really helpful information. The 77-year-old Biden is well known for sharing emotional moments with supporters at campaign events, but until further notice, his human content has been almost completely eliminated as the campaign has moved to the world of virtual town halls, roundtables, news conferences, and now podcasts. Well, he's 77 years old. And if he catches the COVID-19 and dies, which he's in the range to do so, then the DNC has to go and pick up Bernie Sanders as their new pet. So I would be keeping him in and out of the world too if it was me. I actually might have to listen to this just for the laughs. This is going to be great. All right, moving on off of election news now with a couple of personal interest stories here. This is from Fox News. This actually came to my attention from Jake, over the former head of Freedom Scoop, because he could feel it from where he was sitting. Idaho earthquake measured at magnitude 6.5, state's largest in nearly 40 years. This is from Bree Stimson. I might have to Yeah, because I'm not video gaming tonight. I might actually have to watch the Cullen show from Beauty and the Beta tonight and see if Blonde is okay. You got to wonder that because she is like not too far from there as far as I know. I know she got doxxed. I just didn't read it because I'm not that interested in where she lives. But apparently the people at Right Wing Watch are. But let's see what Fox News has to say. A magnitude 6.5 earthquake, Idaho's largest in nearly 40 years, hit the state Tuesday evening. The quake's epicenter was outside of Stanley, about 80 miles northeast of Boise, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Shaking was felt also in Oregon, eastern Washington, Montana, and as far north as Canada, Boise State Public Radio reported. Yeah, I'm not going to say where Jake lives, but he is quite a distance away from Boise there, and the fact that he felt it that far away, I mean, he's practically to Canada anyway, so. Stuff was flying all over the place, Stanley Mayor Steve Body said, the statesman reported. I was upstairs and I tried to walk down the steps and I couldn't because it was shaking too much. At my house, pictures flew off the wall and stuff fell, and there was no structural damage, Body said, according to the Boise radio station. But it was very loud, it sounded like a freight train, and very severe shaking. There were at least 9 aftershocks, but no immediate reports of significant damage or injuries, according to the Idaho statesman. It was the most powerful earthquake since a 6.9 magnitude struck Bora Peak in 1983, killing 2 people, according to the statesman. It would also be the second largest in the state's recorded history if it isn't downgraded. The quake came less than 2 weeks after a 5.7 magnitude hit Salt Lake City. So I've never been in an earthquake. I don't know what that's like. If anybody has, I'd love to read your anecdote about that. But that's crazy. I know I've heard tell that a tornado sounds like a freight train, and I've heard that. I've heard that close up. I've actually seen one come not too far away from where I was cowering and crouching at the time. I was very young when that happened. I was actually afraid of tornadoes for a long time, but I've never seen an earthquake. We had tornado drills, we didn't have earthquake drills, and once again, it was all duck and cover. So, lastly, a little bit of human interest here before we talk about what I'm thankful for. This is from CNN Entertainment. Elliot Stabler is back in a Law and Order SVU spinoff. This is from Madeline Holcomb. Detective Elliot Stabler is leading a new show in a Law and Order SUV, they put in the article, spinoff. He's back, actor Christopher Meloni said of his character on his Facebook. NBC has ordered a 13-episode series from executive producer Dick Wolf, in which Meloni will revive his 12-season character, Deadline reported. The drama will revolve around an NYPD organized crime unit led by Meloni Stabler. It's part of the 9-figure multi-platform 5-year deal Wolf signed with Universal Television last month, Deadline reported. The deal includes multiple series commitments for the producer, responsible for many popular dramas, including the Law & Order franchise and the Chicago Med, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD series. The series could be branded as part of the Law & Order franchise, which leaves room for a crossover from former co-star Mariska Hargitay's SVU, Deadline reported. Fans have lauded Hargitay and Meloni's on-camera chemistry, often rooted for detectives Olivia Benson and Elliot Stabler to get together, something Meloni said would ruin a show. So that's it. I mean, I liked Law & Order, and I'm kind of sad that I don't get to see some of the early episodes anymore because cut that cord, but I like that. I like the direction that they took in that, and I mean, that was one of the most successful TV series that they had. I mean, only The Simpsons topped them for nonfiction, or fiction rather. Wow. Let me get the thoughts straight in my head before I talk here. Only The Simpsons topped them for fictional series. So, yeah, they ran for a long time. I remember watching new episodes of that. They were seasons in already when I was still in high school. And that's been almost 20 years at this point. And aren't they still going? Anyway. Before we get out of here, it's time to talk about something that I'm thankful for. So, given the fact that, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and give the government the finger when the stimulus checks come out. And it is going to be a check for me because I did change. I know they were talking about direct depositing, but I did change banks from the time I from the time I filed my taxes last year. I moved jobs and I no longer go into a city where the bank I was banking in was in. So it's 40 miles to go to the bank otherwise, and from here I have a branch that's 5 miles away from me. So they can't just direct deposit it into the bank account that was on file for them for the last time they direct deposited for me. So yes, they're going to have to send me a check or not do anything at all for me, one of the two. But I am thankful for the fact that I'm in the position that I can do such a thing. I am deemed an essential employee, which means that I do have to go to work every day. And they cut hours back, which I'm going to be using that to take some time and make Contemporary better for everybody, make Eddsworld better for everybody, and even Eddsworld Gaming making that better for everybody. With the extra 4 hours a week that I'm going to get, I'm going to put all the time into Freedom Scoop. But I am thankful for the fact that I don't need to have the government hold my hand, that no matter what, I can still continue to make money and keep a roof over my head. I am probably going to take some time this week and get the PayPal out because I think a lot of you would be interested in making sure I keep the roof over my head and keep content coming out. I don't know if you guys are or not, but I'm going to put the option out there for you. Get the little tin cup out there and say, hey, you know, I don't need a couple bucks from it, but if you want to throw it at me, I'll take it. But I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the audience here too that tunes in every day and keeps me going off of this. And hopefully we can build a better audience, even bigger than what CNN has, without having to captivate people in the airport. Well, we will be back here tomorrow with more content and more news, and we'll see if this earthquake shakes the world apart or if coronavirus takes us apart. And once again, we'll be looking tomorrow at things I like and things I hate, so come in and tune in with us. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.